Kaden Lewis's ascension on the recruiting scene has been otherworldly, and now he's down to 8 schools. Guess who made the cut?
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Thursday, July 11th, 2024. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade, and you're joining us at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. Thanks for making us your first listen or watch. Special shout out to all you everydayers out there and all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord. We're so glad that you're here. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sport stops sportsing like we wanted to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, something for everyone, every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Coming up on the show today, we're looking at Kaden Lewis's top 8, an update on AJ Dybantsa's timeline, the number 1 player in the class of 25, some NCAA tournament expansion talk, and I know it's Thursday. You're all like, Isaac, where is Coach Rob? He's supposed to be here. It's a Thursday. He's going to be joining me tomorrow on Friday's show, so stay tuned. Coach Rob will be with us. Never fear. All right, let's get right into Kaden Lewis. And look, we've talked about him now 3-4 times on the show this summer because this dude has just skyrocketed up the rankings. Everyone has fallen in love with him. He's gone from just like pretty good schools to high major schools to all the blue bloods now. And so you can go back to listen or watch any of our previous conversations about Kaden, but I do want to remind you of a couple brief things. We're not going to go all in depth on him today because we've already done that, but in EYBL, he's been playing with Team Durant, averaged 15.3 points, 3.2 rebounds, 3.6 assists so far. He's class of 2025 guard who was down around 100 but has rocketed up into like the 40s. And I'm just telling you right now, he ain't done. Just keep watching, those rankings refresh as he keeps going up and up and up. He is a guard, somebody that is really balancing well, scoring and playmaking and knowing when to do both. I love that about him. He's out of the DC area. Carolina has some success there, and so would love to see it. So the talking point today is he announced on Wednesday his top 8 schools. Let me give them to you alphabetically. It's Auburn, Duke, Kentucky, Michigan, North Carolina, Syracuse, Tennessee, and UConn. So basically a who's who. And some of the schools you might expect, like, oh, well, it's every blue blood but Kansas. Well, Kansas was in on his list before offered him before a lot of these schools, and he just didn't include them in his top 8. Lewis has already taken unofficial visits to Kentucky, to UConn, to North Carolina. Thank you very much. And also keep in mind, he's got an official visit scheduled for Carolina on October 4th. Great news there. And so naming his top 8, he went kind of in depth on all 8 of them. You can find that on Zag's blog. I'm just going to read you what he said about North Carolina, give you a couple thoughts on that. So here's Kaden Lewis's thoughts on North Carolina to Adam Zagoria. Quote, "It was great," his unofficial visit we're talking about here. "It's a college town and one of the most respected programs. They're known for their guards and getting them to the league as well, which is one of the main things I'm focusing on. Hubert Davis was super cool, genuine guy, and a lot of the staff is super genuine, and the players seem to really like it there. Their system, they play really fast, which I think I could excel in." I agree with that. He, Coach Davis, just said he could see me playing there, and I agree. Here's the big key for me. Isaac saying this now. Kaden said he needs guards because he has some high-profile guards now that'll be gone by the time I would get there, like this time next year, so he could see me stepping into play day 1. Love that. He recognizes, all right, look, RJ Davis is there. He's out of eligibility no matter what, so he's gone. Elliot Cadeau is probably going to be gone this year. We're assuming he's going to have a big uptick from last year, that progression from freshman to sophomore is big time. Look, Ian Jackson is not going to be around unless just something goes funky this year. I would imagine Seth Trimble would still be around, but there's an opening and an opportunity for Kaden Lewis to come in and be a dude because of what I said earlier, that ability to distribute, to play make, but also to call his own number when necessary. And he's really, really making strides, particularly this summer. We're seeing it in knowing when to do all those things, how to lead a team well. So he also talked to Zagoria to say his goal is that he wants to commit at some point in the fall, essentially before his senior year gets going from a basketball season standpoint. But he is going to visit all 8 of these schools. And it didn't specify if it's going to be unofficial or official, but do keep in mind there are now unlimited official visits, so he can do that if he wants to. This is one of those guys I would love to have, somebody that's kind of just come up, not been at the top all the time, but is clearly hungry, wants to, just make something of himself. I love that. So we'll see if he's somebody Carolina can get. Now, I also want to talk about AJ Dybantsa, who is the number 1 player in the class of 2025, was in 2026, reclassed last year. And for those unfamiliar, right, like Cooper Flagg is the big number 1 player that everybody's talking about right now that's going to Duke this year. That's Dybantsa for next year. Who am I trying to think of here? The Twins. Boozer. Good grief, Isaac. Come on. Cam Boozer was number 1 in the class. Dybantsa reclassified and jumped up over him. And so this is the dude. This is who everyone wants. He had a quick interview that came out with Kristen Peak from Yahoo, who does like draft stuff for them, but is all in on high school recruiting. And so there are 4 little takeaways that I had from that interview. Number 1, I think the most critical thing here is that he very definitively said, I am going to college. Immediately shut down with Kristen any talk of going international, playing somewhere else, playing with OTE, anything like that. He is going to be a college basketball player next year. So that's good news, number 1. Number 2, his dad is handling his recruitment right now. AJ said, I don't have any college coaches' numbers. My dad handles the conversations and basically brings me in when necessary or when coaches want to talk to me. The thing is, sometimes we see this, like with, you think about the Ball family, right? Like, that's like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. This to me, all along, not even just from this interview, but all along and in this interview, has felt like the healthy version of that, where it's less about like, for example, I saw somebody commented on this interview I watched and said, Pop's got arms around this one tight. And clearly the insinuation there was like dad's trying to be a helicopter dad, be all in it. And the words of that statement might be correct, but in a healthy way, in terms of like, I'm going to protect my son and help guard and shepherd him through this, bring him in when necessary. But other than that, just let him be a kid, let him focus on school and basketball and other things like that. And then we get to point 3. This is where AJ will start to come into it. He said after Peach Jam is when he wants to narrow things down. So that's when he's going to start talking to coaches more. He said his hope, kind of like we talked about just with Kaden Lewis, is to get down to around 8 teams post Peach Jam. So that's number 3. Number 4 is that he wants to start taking visits September, October, kind of, again, similar to Caden Lewis. So hopefully we'll see what's going to happen with all that. Again, this is the dude, AJ Dybantsa is one of those guys that's like, you get him, he can change your program or keep your program at the tip top level. So, I was talking to our guy, Riley Davis, the other day, who's now in our Locked On Tar Heels Discord. It's great to have him in there. But on Wednesday, I was just saying to him, we've got all these elite offers out in the class of 2025. I'd love to land 2 of them, whether it's Dybantsa or Koa Pete or whatever, or Kaden Lewis as he continues to climb. I think 2 of them would be good. You bring that in with what you have, transfers, and then grow it with some guys that might be a little bit lower in the class to round it out, and you're looking at a good squad. So we'll keep our eyes on all that. Very quickly, Couple summer league updates from Wednesday. Thursday, by the way, is a day off, no action. And then Friday starts the official NBA Summer League in Las Vegas. But, Leaky Black and the Hornets weren't in action Wednesday night. Spurs weren't in action, so no Harrison Ingram. But Tony Bradley finally got in a game for the 76ers, played 12 minutes, scored 4 points, 2 of 4 from the field, 2 boards, 2 steals, and 1 turnover. It's just like, it's tough for Tony. He's been around for a while now, and he's playing in Summer League. You hate to see that. Cormac Ryan played, but not much for the Thunder. 5 minutes, no points, 0 of 3 from the field, 0 of 2 from 3, 1 rebound. Not much there. The big frustration is, once again, Armando Bacot did not play. He did play the second game for the Jazz, but didn't get in the first or the third game. And in fact, in this game, the Jazz only played 8. And I know he's behind a lot of guys in the front court there, but I just don't get it. Why is Walker Kessler playing so much? And again, you've got the actual Summer League coming up this weekend. That's probably where you're trying to win things right now. Just try out your roster, feel out what you got, and then move on from there. And so I don't understand. Would love to see him get some more burn, especially with like Flip doesn't look great. He's got some moments, but man, I don't know. So anyway, we'll see what happens if Mondo can get some more playing time as we get into actual Summer League. Now, NCAA Tournament expansion talks have been going on yet again, and despite several days of meetings this week, no decision has been reached. Why not? Come on, man. Let's get to a decision here. We'll talk about that and more coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel. I love sports. I love them so much. I just never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sportsing like we want them to, right? Like the doldrums of summer are tough. But FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you got to do is open the app, dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. For example, World Series champion odds. Right now, Dodgers lead the way at plus 320, followed by the Phillies at plus 450, Yankees plus 550, Orioles at plus 700, and the Atlanta Braves round out the top 5 at plus 900. So if you want to get in on that action or other stuff, head on over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Hey, thanks again for making Locked On Tar Heels your first listen or watch of the day. We're going to talk some NCAA tournament expansion right now. If you want to hear more about that, we're going to be talking about it this week as well on Locked On College Basketball. Would love to have you join us there as well. So we knew that the NCAA Men's Basketball Committee had been meeting this week. I haven't really talked about it yet here on the show because I wanted to wait until we got any news about it. On Wednesday evening, Matt Norlander, who's one of CBS Sports' college basketball main 2 reporters, tweeted out, quote, "The NCAA Men's Basketball Committee has wrapped its annual summer meetings with no decision in on whether or not to expand the NCAA tournament," sources tell CBS Sports. Why not? I don't understand why we're leaving these meetings with no decision. You're either going to do it or you're not. You know that I'm all out on this thing. I'm sure you are too. Let's keep it where it is. Don't mess with the single best thing that you've got going, NCAA. And clearly, though, for some reason, we can't come to consensus on it. Norlander goes on. The topic was discussed at length Tuesday and remains up for debate for many reasons. Arguably, the biggest being the significant financial commitment, millions more in expenses that would come with expanding the men's and women's fields. There's no timeline on a verdict. There are other notable updates regarding the NCAA tournament that were approved and will be announced Thursday, sources said. So a couple more things there. It's interesting because the conversation all along has been expansion because we want more money. But the what sounds like the biggest sticking point is expenses going out as a reason not to expand. And I don't care what the main reason is or main reasons are. If that's a thing, then we got to say no. I'm just so over this thing. Let's quit Like, what's that quote? Either pee or get off the toilet, right? Like, come on, man. Let's just quit dancing around this thing. And then obviously, as we said there at the end, other updates that are going to come out today, Thursday. And so if there's anything worth talking about, we'll mention that on Friday's show, at least in passing, so that we're up to date on it. If it's some sort of big changes, we'll talk about it more in depth. So there's that. Now, let me say this. I feel 0 ounces of sympathy to power conference commissioners who want more teams. Translation, more of their teams in this tournament. Because, like, I feel like Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, is the guy that's just been like the bane of my NCAA tournament existence for a while now. Because this dude is the one pushing and cajoling and arguing seemingly more than anybody else. And I know there's others that are in on it, but he, to me, has been the face of it. And it's like, homie, you are the one that decided to beef up your conference. You are the one that decided. You didn't have to. Nobody held a gun to your head and say, all right, Greg Sankey, get more teams in the SEC. But now that you're stuck in that position where you're going to have more teams and more teams with bad records, this is a bed that you have made. Now you've got to lie in it, and don't come whining and complaining to me because you want more of your middling or sub 500 teams in this tournament. This is an issue of your own design. Don't make the rest of us suffer for your choices. My bottom line, leave this thing left well enough alone. I always say, if you want to do anything, reel it back into 64. Don't expand it. And I know that's never going to happen. We're not going to put that toothpaste back in the tube. But still, the point is well taken. If we're going to do any sort of movement other than 68, 64 is better than anything else that's on the table. So a couple other things to keep in mind. And then I want to bring up, coming up in our last segment, Matt Norlander's kind of main points of his article, because I think it's helpful for us to think about. The NCAA is considering 3 options. None of them, by the way, are my go back to 64. So just know that I'm saying that in jest. Option number 1, stay at 68. Please, dear goodness, make that the thing. Option number 2, increase to 72 teams. Option number 3, increase to 76. Again, none of that is great. And then here's the other thing you need to know before we move on. The NCAA has also said they're not going to move when the NCAA tournament is played. And so that means regardless of adding teams or staying the same at 68, the men's and women's Final Four will continue to be played the Saturday and Monday prior to the Masters. That's not moving. That's for, if you're unaware, that's how we determine and backdate the college basketball season. When is the Masters? All right. So the Final Four is the Saturday before the Masters Saturday, right? Secondly, Conference Championship Week is not going to move either. That's going to stay where that is, meaning that from the end of Conference Championship Week, right, like the ACC Championship is on Saturday, the next day is Selection Sunday, you got 3 weeks in there. That's going to stay the same. So obviously that is a massive impact on how all of this is going to go, because if you add teams, that's all got to be squeezed into that Tuesday and Wednesday when the play-in games are. You can't there's not 9 days in that week. You got to do Tuesday, Wednesday, because then this thing is starting Thursday. Now, I know the women truncated and do it more quickly, but the men aren't going to do it. It's just not going to happen. And so that's where we're at right now. Now, Matt Norlander brought up 5 good points in his article that he wrote actually earlier in the week about why expansion is no bueno. I'd like to bring those up to you, but also give you my commentary on those 5 things. We'll get to that in just a second. I want to talk more on Matt Norlander's article from earlier in the week about NCAA tournament expansion. He gave 5 really good reasons for why it shouldn't happen. And so I want to provide you those and then give you my commentary on it, because that's why you're here. Also, before we get into it, a little behind the scenes, a little how the sausage is made, because yours truly, Isaac, right here, I am a dork and a goober. I have actually already recorded this thing. When I went to edit it all, this 3rd segment, the video was there, everything was great, but the audio on it, both for what I needed for the audio version of the podcast and the audio for YouTube, was gone. I had muted myself to cough in between segments and then just completely forgot to unmute. So here I am re-recording all of this. So if anything's weird or confusing or doesn't make sense, that's why. But it should flow really naturally. Just sometimes it's fun to give you a little behind the scenes look at how this all comes together. Anyway, Matt Norlander's 5 reasons NCAA tournament expansion is both undesirable and unnecessary. Number 1, most sports fans are against expansion. This is true. And I would love to, is anybody out there listening to this or watching this in favor of expansion? And if so, why? I would just love to hear it, because I'm always interested in both sides of this. I'm wholeheartedly against it. Call me a purist, whatever. That's just my thought. Now, part of this, as we think about the fans, I know the NCAA often gets a bad rap for a lot of stuff. I know that they do, because I often give them a bad rap for a lot of stuff. This NCAA tournament expansion issue, outside of them kind of spinning their feet on making a decision, is not the NCAA's fault. Keep this in mind. The NCAA College Basketball Committee is simply doing their due diligence to have these conversations right now. It's due diligence that's been foisted upon them by pushy commissioners like Greg Sankey from the SEC that we talked about earlier. They're the ones that are trying to say, we want this, we want our teams, we want to get this in. And so then the committee is simply doing their job by looking into it. Again, I wish they would hurry up and decide, but so as things stand, it's everyone from the NCAA side that controls this decision-making. It's not the commissioners themselves. So ultimately, the NCAA will decide if we're going to expand or not. I actually feel better about that than if it was in the hands of the commissioners. And I get why they want it, right? But think about, for example, how watered down have bowl games or bowl season become. You know, you've got all these bowls with nobody there and nobody cares about it. And it's just like, that's ultimately, like, a lot of people already don't go to Dayton. What if we expand and get extra games? Those would be playing games in Dayton or elsewhere. It's not like they're going to be well attended. So the fan doesn't want this. So don't give it to them. And at some point, I know we're trying to do everything for the money, but at some point, can we just listen to the people that care about this? That's what makes it what it is anyway, is the college basketball fans. And I know that so many of these commissioners are money grubbing and trying to get that, but that actually leads us into point number 2 from Matt Norlander's article. NCAA tournament expansion actually won't bring much more money, if any. So hear me out on this. Here's my commentary with it. Just because there's expansion does not necessarily mean that there will be more revenue along with it. But there will be, if you expand, more expenses. More teams, more expenses. You got to fly them where they're going. You got to feed them and do all of these things. Another venue, right? If you expand it so much that you need another venue for playing games. Simple math, folks. More money out in expenses, same money in because you're not getting new revenue. That's a loss. That's not a win. It doesn't move the needle. Here's the thing. CBS, Turner, TBS, TNT, all that, they're already locked in with their media agreement through 2032. And there's nothing that says they've got to renegotiate just because there's more teams added. They might, but why would they, like, oh, you're giving us more subpar, mediocre teams? Sure, let's just pour more money in. No, they don't care about that. So just keep that in mind. Expansion won't necessarily bring in more money, but it will mean more expenses. Point number 3 from Norlander's article. Expanding amid uncertain times would be short-sighted. Think about this. The time that we are in right now is the most upheaval we've ever seen in NCAA. Couple main contributors to this. NIL, right? Completely flipped the amateurism model on its head. At the same time, the transfer portal starting up, and then you got that little sub thing that the whole COVID thing, which is about to be gone, but that's been part of this. And then now you've got this massive realignment happening that we haven't even seen games with all that realignment and the death of the Pac-12 yet. That hadn't even happened. And all of that brings my question, or makes my question, wouldn't it therefore be in everyone's best interest to just let the dust settle a little bit before we go trying to change the postseason of the NCAA tournament, which once again is the single best thing that you've got going, NCAA? So wouldn't you want to vote to not expand? That just seems to make sense. Everything else is tumultuous. Let's just keep something sane and still and normal. In the midst of uncertain times, the single best way to help your fans, the people who, by the way, their eyeballs pay for all this, because if they're not there, the money's not there. The best way to do that is keep the best entity the NCAA has the way it already is. There you go. Point number 4 from Norlander's article. Minor expansion of the tournament will worsen scheduling for mid-majors. If you're unaware, it is hard for the best mid-majors to schedule non-conference games against high majors because they don't want to take the risk of losing a game like that. That's why, for example, Alabama just put out their non-conference schedule earlier this week. McNeese, with Will Wade, who used to be at LSU, is expected to be one of the best mid-majors in all of America this year. Alabama scheduled them in their non-conference. That is the exception. That is not the norm. And so when we have expansion, that's only going to make that more difficult. So if you got more teams in the tournament, that means it's easier for these middling high major teams to get in. And so it's like, why would I bother with a difficult non-conference strength of schedule if it's getting even easier for me to make my way in? Wouldn't I just have an easy non-con strength of schedule, boost my record, and then that way, hopefully I'll do good enough in conference play to get in? So all of that to me means that if we expand this thing, mid-majors are at an even greater disadvantage than they already are, which also leads me to point 5 from Norlander's article. The Pac-12's death guarantees more at-large buys for the big boys. Here's what I mean. Think of the math. The way it was previous to this year, there were 32 conferences, which meant 32 automatic qualifiers, which then meant 36 at-large bids. With the death of the Pac-12, we're down to 31 automatic qualifiers, which means 37 at-large bids. That extra at-large, you think that's going to a mid-major? No, that's just not how this has ever worked. Now, beyond that, the Pac-12 was not a single bid conference. Over the past decade, they've averaged 4.3 bids out of the Pac-12. And again, say you got 4.3 bids, let's say 4. At least 3 of those are going to go to high majors. So these high major conferences are already getting some more teams in than they were. So why do you need expansion? You're already doing that by what you did to grow your conference and kill off the Pac-12. Leave well enough alone. You got the bids. History suggests those extra ones aren't going to be mid-majors, so what good is it anyway? So all of that to say, end of the day, I love those points from Matt Norlander. I'm with him. And again, do not mess with the tournament. It's the best thing we got. College athletics is in such a whirlwind. Just let this be. So we'll wait to find out what's going to happen with all of that. In the meantime, go ahead and subscribe to our show on audio and video if you haven't already. If you're not part of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord, man, we'd love to have you. Come for the Tar Heels, stay for the community. The link is in the show notes, and it's free to join. We'd absolutely love to have you. Lots of people are coming in all the time. Great conversation every day. It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk again tomorrow on Friday, again with Coach Rob. But until then, peace.